the Arabian Racehorse podcast with Debbie Burt and Gary Capel.
Welcome to the first edition of the Arabian Racehorse podcast, brought to you in association with Equine Medi Record. I'm Debbie Burt. I'm editor and photographer for the Arabian Racehorse, and I've been working with Arrow since 2012. Joining me is longtime Arrow commentator Gary Capel, who unfortunately due to COVID has been off track and on the sofa for most of 2020. But I understand you're back now doing your other spots with William Hill. Is that right?
Yeah, William Hill and SIS, which goes into all the into the betting shops in the UK as well.
And you've got a long night ahead of you, apparently.
Yeah, I'm doing 19 races from Chile this evening, which starts 5 o'clock and goes all the way through until 1 a.m. in the morning. So they're notoriously bad timekeepers as well. So it could be even later than the scheduled 1 o'clock finish. Okay,
well, we'll try and make this brief, Gary. The Arrow season started with the cracking Group 1, obviously at Goodwood, always a great race, won for the second time by Ebraz. And then after a long wait, obviously waiting for our races to be allowed to go ahead, we finally got away with the domestic runners at Wolverhampton last Saturday. That was a Wathba Stallions Cup maiden stakes over 7 furlongs. Obviously we'd expect a full race and we pretty much did have a full race. We lost one due to some transport problems, but I don't know about you, but I think it was a good race. What do you feel?
Yeah, I think the form of this race is going to work out particularly well. I was quite impressed with the winner. There were a few in there that caught the eye and behind. Quite a few of them, including the winner, I think will appreciate a little bit further as their career progresses in keeping perhaps more with their breeding. But the overall standard of the form, I think for the first maiden of the season, albeit it's obviously a lot later than it would usually be, and we had a slightly unusual trade, the fact that we had quite so many 3-year-olds in the race. I think the overall form, it was a decent level of form, and I think the race will work out well.
Okay, and a great win for a new trainer. It's really nice to see a new young trainer joining Arrow, and someone who had no previous experience of Arabians, although obviously she comes from a racing background with her father having been a trainer.
I'm sure she's learning quite quickly about them. That's usually the case, isn't it? Yeah, great to see Jessica Quinlan start her training career off with a winner. Obviously, as you mentioned, the family are well known in the racing industry. Obviously, a dad and obviously a brother's a successful jump jockey as well. So, yeah, bred into the game a little bit, if you like. But yes, learning how to train Arabians. I should imagine it's been a very fast learning process, and obviously these horses, most of them are Qatari bred. I think that she has in training. Obviously, we know the owner still's quite familiar with racing out there, and also perhaps a little bit more so in France. But for all that they're well bred, they still have to get to the track ready to race and know their jobs, and the winner certainly did.
Absolutely, and then the 1, 2, 3, and the second, third, and fourth in the race all came from James Owen. Wanasa Herdan won the Hatter, I believe, and Nadal Sheba, he also looks quite a nice horse. What did you think?
Yeah, I think Wanasa, obviously she was getting all the weight allowances, wasn't she? She had a very low weight, just 9-1 on her back, so she was getting weight all around. She looked the most likely winner turning for home. She possibly got there a little bit too soon, maybe. I think next time they might well hold her up a little bit and produce that run a little bit later, because she was left in front turning for home, and in the end that tail did swish around a little bit, and she was sort of caught close home, wasn't she? But that race I'm sure will bring her along mentally. I think whether they maybe try a little bit of headgear perhaps next time out as well, we'll see. James Owen certainly knows what he's doing in that regard, so I don't think she'll have too many problems fighting a race. Satam is a horse that obviously James bought at the Arcana sale and obviously runs in the James Owen Racing Club colours. And I'm sure they'll be thrilled with that as a debut effort, because he was never near a second. And again, I think the experience will bring him along a little bit like the third and fourth horses. They will both improve when they step up in trip, as is in keeping with their pedigree. So, and you can even go further down the list to the 5th and 6th, G1 and Jinan. I think again, both of those two horses will be better when they're seen over further.
Absolutely, Gary. And now to move on to the next Group 1 race of our season, the UAE President Cup, which is also the UK Arabian Derby. The UAE President Cup has been back sponsoring this race since 2016. It's been a lovely association with Doncaster. Obviously a bit disappointing with the situation with the crowds this time, a bit like the situation we had with Goodwood, but I think it's still going to be a good race, even though we've only got 6 runners. That race doesn't tend to attract a lot of runners as a rule anyway. And the last 3 winners have previously won the French Derby, and it looks like another chance for this year's winner, Hattel, to follow up. What would you say?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. Certainly on the ratings, he's got the highest rating, and probably by, well, the best part of a stone in hand, really. What we do find with the Arabians, particularly at this stage of their career, if they're lightly raced, and many of the horses coming into this race are lightly raced, and most of them are stepping up to Group 1 company for the first time, they can take big improvements in their form, as Hattel did, really, when winning the French Arabian Derby a couple of months ago. So, I mean, it's clearly a race that has been targeted at. As you point out, the last 3 winners of the French Arabian Derby have gone on to take this particular contest. So, strictly on all-known form, he's going to take all the beating, and he's very much bred to be a little bit of a champion as well. Obviously, his dam was a multiple Group 1 winner, Misner, Kayola Classic winner, and heard in particular, and Shane Malady, perhaps one of the greatest Arabian mares seen of all time. I think 36 from 37 or 37 from 38. I can never quite remember what that is, but she only lost once in her career. So this horse is very well bred, and he's looks as though he's inherited a little bit of their qualities. I think the way he goes through his races, he still looks a little bit green, if it's not too silly a thing to say, when winning the French Derby. I still think he was learning. It was only his 3rd career lifetime start. And I think this track will play to his strengths as well.
Absolutely. I mean, all his form so far has been on good or softer. Doncaster, as we know, can be quite a testing course. At the moment, the forecast is for good ground, good to soft in places on the round course, which obviously is what he's been tackling. I think it's also interesting that Tad O'Shea rides him for the first time, because, of course, Tad won the Kahala Classic on Madame Misner all those years ago. So a nice little association there if that comes together.
Yeah, very much so. And obviously, you know, Ty's, I think, is it 7 times champion UAE jockey? I think it is. Obviously, the racing out there is 50-50 split, isn't it, between thoroughbred racing and Arabian racing? And he obviously has a decent association with the breed, and as you point out, with the family as well.
Absolutely. And the time that Hattel posted, even though it was on easy ground in France, was one of the fastest since, you know, the records in the last 10 years. You have to think that, as you say, he did look a bit green winning that race. It was only his 3rd start. So, you know, we could be seeing a really nice horse run at Doncaster this week.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, the only obvious slight concern would be that they don't go much of a gallop with that small field. It could get quite tactical. I don't think that'd actually bother him, but just in case he refuses to settle. Obviously, they went a good gallop that day, and he did take a bit of a grip early on, I noted. So that would be perhaps maybe a slight concern. But hopefully Ty O'Shea can settle in. But as I say, if it does get tactical, that would be perhaps a concern if he over races in the early stages, as I said. But yeah, that was a good time. Amir de Soleil took them along at a decent clip in that particular contest. Well, they teed it up for Hattel, but he still had to get the job done. And as I say, mentally, I think that brought him forward a little bit further. That was his first run in group company. So he's very much the horse to beat.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a quick word about the domestic runners. Obviously, we've talked about Satam, who now has a quick reappearance after his debut at Wolverhampton last week. Very exciting for the racing club owners to have a runner in the Derby, bearing in mind that the horse was such a cheap purchase at the upcoming sale. Yeah,
fantastic, isn't it? Congratulations to the racing club. It's wonderful that they've got so many. Well, a couple of their horses. They had Tujari, of course, in the race at Goodwood as well in a Group 1 race. So obviously, this horse, you know, it was a very taking race course debut. Okay, he's got a lot to find on the figures, and full credit to James as well, because going over to do that Arcana sale, quite a lot of the horses that they're not cheap purchases. This was a relatively cheap purchase for him, all things considered. So it's nice to see that this horse is capable of mixing it in Group 1 company, and they'll be picking up a decent check hopefully as well.
Absolutely. And one of James's other runners, Alameen, obviously for His Highness Sheikh Hamdan, he's actually been quite enterprising and had a couple of runs in Belgium this year, both over a mile. The last one, obviously, he won. He's the highest rated of the UK horses. It's still a big ask for him, but what do you think of his chances?
Yeah, I mean, he progressed with each start, certainly in terms of his finishing position, at least anyway, last season with his runs in the UK. He looked a little bit of a work in progress, I think it's fair to say. As you point out, he's had a couple of runs over in Europe already this year, winning on the most recent outing in a pretty close finish with a couple of horses close up. He beat Emiratu, who we know very well on these shores, who's a hardy and a very reliable yardstick, if you like. He's clearly getting better with his racing, so you're loath to discount him. It will take a huge career best. Jim Crowley's obviously been booked to ride him. So I'll be disappointed if he's out of the first 3 or 4, let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And so thanks very much, Gary. We'll be back next week to review the Derby. And of course, we've got another Wathba Stallions Cup coming up, this time a 0 to 75 handicap, which will be on Monday. So we'll see you next week. Thank you.